Hey guys, I am Dr. Kim Sage. Welcome to my YouTube channel. If you are new here, please consider subscribing and clicking the bell, and that way you'll get notified when I post new videos on Wednesdays and occasionally when I post bonus videos. Today's video is all about 6 of the most common hidden signs of Cptsd, which is complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Quick reminder, what is Cptsd? It is basically a series of traumatic events, often of a more interpersonal or invasive and relational nature. I just like to think of it as relational trauma, sort of repetitive relational trauma, often at the hands of situations or persons where you should have been safe. There are some more extreme dynamics around it as well, and I will list here what other types of Cptsd are. But often when we're talking about it, I often see it most within our childhoods and often at the hands of caregivers, siblings, school environments, coaches, mentors, whatever, places where we should have been safe, but we were not. Now, though we talk a lot about complex trauma, it's still emerging, and I notice that people still, as I will post about it sometimes, say, what is that? What are you talking about? And so it really is important to check out maybe some of these videos if you're not sure and want to learn more about complex trauma. But the heart of it is that oftentimes we're walking around with symptoms that we don't quite recognize as full criteria types of symptoms. So let's get into 6 of the most common but hidden signs that you may have complex trauma. The first one is a tendency to be forgetful, to space out, to have foggy memory, and not really be good at remembering childhood in general. Now, we know that the brain doesn't necessarily remember a lot of childhood. Some of us have better memory than others. But where I see this most commonly is that when people get sort of triggered emotionally, or they're just talking about their childhood. For example, I might say in a session, tell me about the situation you shared about, let's say, your mom. You said she was loving. Can you give me an example? And or they'll start to tell you a story, even that's happening right now. And all of a sudden, when it really becomes of a more interpersonal or emotional or relational or traumatic nature, people will dissociate and sort of space out. They will say, you know what, I'm feeling really foggy right now. And so concentration, memory, spacing out, dissociation, that can be a very common sign. The next sign is oftentimes really what I call a center of toxic shame or I am bad type belief system. It really might look like low self-esteem, but what it really at the heart is this core of that there's something wrong with me. I'm just, I can't put my finger on it, but I just, when it really comes down to it, I am unworthy, unlovable, shameful, and things of that nature. And so there's been this internalization of that whatever happened in childhood is not about the other person or people. It is about me and how I am defective. The third most common hidden symptom is often emotional flashbacks. Now, because we are talking so much more about mental health and anxiety and depression, it's hard to know how much of those symptoms are happening as a result of current dynamics sometimes, how much are genetic, how much are part of a historical nature with childhood wounds or trauma. But an emotional flashback is really a regression, a return back to a feeling state of childhood. And so what do I mean by that? What I mean is that oftentimes we're going along in our day and we're maybe watching something. We're watching a show on Netflix or HBO, or we're talking to our kids, or we had an expectation. I always use the one that if I don't set expectations and I come home and my kids have done nothing when they were supposed to help me a little bit, or I didn't ask them to help me at all because I don't like to do that because my mom was so intense about it, but I don't set boundaries around it. And when I come in the door, I feel unappreciated and alone. And it's not about what they didn't do, because if I could just focus on that, I'd be like, okay, Kim, you're not setting the boundaries. You're not holding, conversations and consequences. But in the moment, I'm not necessarily really not an angry person, but I can come in the door. This happened a lot when I used to work and drive home. When you first come home, it's that, it's like you have to reorient to home, even if you've just been at the mall, but especially I think at a job all day where you've been out of your home environment. And you walk in and all of a sudden you're just mad, because you look around and things weren't done. And what's often happening is I'm returning back to a child state where I always felt like everything was incumbent upon me to take care of things, to feel maybe not, appreciated or honored, or maybe I just don't feel appreciated in my relationship and my kids are triggering that, or my partner is. So it really is a returning state, often back to a state that you often felt in childhood. Feel free to post down below in the comment section if you want how you get triggered emotionally and the things that seem like they shouldn't be triggering, how they are. But basically it's like you kind of go somewhere else out of nowhere. You get angry or sad or triggered in some regard. So that's an emotional flashback. Number 4 is often relationship issues, chronic unhealthy dynamics where you never really feel seen and heard. And this might be in your marriage or partnership or the dating partners you choose. It might also play out in your friendships where they seem really great and intense, and then over time you realize that you didn't speak up for yourself, or they're passive aggressive towards you, or they're not very kind or thoughtful towards you, or you don't really connect. And so what ends up happening is, as a result of our complex trauma, we often play out our own disorganized patterns. Now, it may not be full spectrum disorganized attachment, but it has this very mixed avoidant and anxious attachment pattern. What do I mean by that? Basically, we can get really anxious, like, oh my gosh, this person, doesn't love me, they're going to leave me. And then also get really avoidant at times, shut down, remove ourselves emotionally. And so that kind of back and forth pattern between not choosing healthy partners and or our own selves engaging in really anxious and then really avoidant ways and being easily triggered, that's a very common and often unseen sign of CPTSD. Number 5 is living in a very hyper-vigilant and state of survival mode. And so the combination is you're always sort of activated in that hyper-vigilant system. It just looks like high anxiety or relational anxiety. But at the core, you're always on guard. You might have a very sudden startle reflex. You might just always feel like at any point, everything is going to fall apart. And you're just always scanning and you're reading people and overthinking and overanalyzing and in your head. And it just goes around and around and around like a loop. And alongside that can be survival mode, where no matter what you achieve or how good things are, because of the nature of complex trauma, where it was predictably unpredictable or predictably painful or wounding or confusing, you sort of always live in this like prepared to, pack your bags and flee kind of mental dynamic. And so it's really hard for you to relax and be present and be mindful. Meditation can be torturous. I don't love traditional meditation because I can't do it, but I do love guided meditations, just a quick aside, where someone's walking you through a meditation. But the core is it's really hard to not be elevated and be in that state. That can often be a sign. And the last sign is very common and it's often hidden and unfortunately gets pushed through the medical system, which is chronic physical health issues. Of course, we can also see mental health issues, but these are things we don't necessarily expect. And so things like IBS, autoimmune disease, Crohn's disease, cancer, diabetes, just chronic stomach issues, a lot of stuff, achy bones and joints. And of course, all of that can also create, of course, an impact from childhood trauma. We know that those of us who have more severe childhood trauma do tend to have more of everything I just listed in our bodies. But you often can get stuck in this loop where, let's say, you're focusing on the body symptoms, and especially when they're not resolving or you're on a ton of medications and you're just feeling worse. But it's like easier to say, and some cultures actually, we know too, that some cultures it's easier to say my head hurts and focus on the physical body because mental health is not allowed or acceptable in terms of, what we can talk about. But it really can manifest in our bodies through just a range of issues, from obesity to, chronic health issues that we cannot seem to get on top of, and even eating disorders in general where people don't eat, right? It's just this massive thing where everything is playing out in our body and it looks like it's about our body, but it's really not. It's often about relational trauma and complex types of wounds. So those are 6 of what I see as the most common but often hidden types of signs. Please feel free to share other ones that you think are also hidden too down below. There are so many signs of CPTSD, and certainly everything I listed could be related to other issues, but it is worth checking out and having maybe an evaluation or seeing somebody who is a licensed mental health person. If you notice that, yeah, I do resonate with these, and when you look at understanding your childhood, either it was emotionally intense or there was neglect and emotional neglect was occurring and you just really weren't cared for, that can be just as traumatic and just as impactful on your mental and physical health. So thanks for watching. Please feel free to follow me here and on TikTok where I post every day. I'm going to be doing some series on what I call sort of film therapy and reality therapy type evaluations using people in media to help tap into relational issues and complex trauma and childhood trauma. So I hope to see you here or there or somewhere else. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next Wednesday. Take care. Bye.